G20 conclave. As the name suggests, this conclave aims to decode how India is shaping the G20 and how the G20 presidency is shaping India's global future. Now, as the president of the G20 and as a formidable voice of the global south, India is emerging as a critical diplomatic power. In the post-pandemic world, with shifting power dynamics and alliances, more often than not, India has taken stands drifting from the norm for its own interests and for the interests of its allies, even if it's sometimes at the cost of making some superpowers uncomfortable. We have defined what many now call the India way amid a new world order. Over the last few years, under the current government, with the Ukraine invasion, Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan, climate emergencies across the globe, and cross-border terrorism, India has evolved a transformative diplomatic position. Today, we are honored to have with us the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. We also have an esteemed audience of ambassadors, former generals, foreign policy experts, and students of foreign policy. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Philip Green, Australia's High Commissioner to India. We also welcome Mr. Naor Gilon, the Ambassador of Israel to India, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan. We also have among us Mohammad Javed Hosseini, the Deputy Chief of Mission for Iran, Mr. Federico Salas, the Ambassador of Mexico to India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Maldives. And as the government is pitching to keep foreign policy to go beyond select corridors, to keep it sharp but simple, it has pitched India's foreign policy as one that pushes the best interests of 140 crore Indians. And the man who has charted the India way and pitched India's presidency as one that brings G20 back to its business is the Honorable External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Ahead of the big G20 meet in Delhi next week, it's my honor to welcome Dr. S. Jaishankar on stage for a conversation with NDTV's Editor-in-Chief, Mr. Sanjay Pugalia.
Good afternoon, namaskar. NDTV network has done a G20 conclave few days ago, and this is another very special, very exclusive conversation that we are going to have with Dr. Jaishankar today. G20 conversation so far has happened in a high jargon for specialist audiences. It is very important that just before the event, for the larger Indian audiences, we put the context in correct place and also sort of give you a viewer's guide that how to look at G20 proceedings that will happen September 9th to 10th. Thank you so much for your time, sir. This is very busy schedule for you. There are 2-3 words which are often mentioned, that what is India way, what is Modi diplomacy, or what is Jaishankar doctrine. We want to understand all of that one by one, but first thing I think you should give us a sense of broader view. What is so unique about G20 presidency and this happening in India?
Well, I think what is unique is, first of all, the G20 itself. It started in 2008. Before that, you had essentially a G7, which were all Western countries mostly. And after the 2008 global financial crisis, those countries realized that they needed more countries, developing countries, a broader group to deal with the challenges of the world. Now, it started with a very narrow mandate. Every year, more problems came, so the mandate kept getting bigger. But this year, it is special for 2 reasons. One, the world today in 2023 is a far more complicated place than it has been for a long time. And the reasons for it, I think everybody would know. We've had once-in-a-century pandemic, whose impact on the economy, on societies, on social fabric, on employment, on logistics has been horrific. We are still experiencing the impact of an ongoing conflict. And because we are today more globalized, a conflict which is taking place in Europe is having an energy impact, a food impact, a fertilizer impact, an inflation impact on the world. There are concerns with like debt, trade disruptions. There are worries about climate events which are happening with more and more frequency, and big climate events which have big economic consequences. So if you look at the state of the world is far more difficult, more complicated, more worrisome than it has been for a long time. So that's one reason why it is different. The second reason is, in such a situation, who can step forward and try to find a middle ground? Because as you can see, there are two big divides in the world today. One is what you can call the East-West divide, and the other is the North-South divide. So which country is in a position today to address both divides, to help find a common ground, help search for a solution? And such a country, should not be neutral. It should also be a country that commands respect, which has had achievements to its own credit, which has something to show to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. And that country happens to be India. So I think you have, therefore, a long answer to your question is, it is unique today because the global situation is unique and the G20 presidency is today unique. And frankly, what we have done in the last 10 years is also unique.
हम भी ये मानते हैं कि G20 की इंडियन प्रेसिडेंसी शायद G20 के तौर तरीकों को फ्यूचर के लिए ही चेंज कर देगा. ये दिख रहा है जिस तरीके से हम लोगों ने, इंडिया ने इसके बारे में बातचीत की है अभी तक. तभी एक थोड़ा सा लोगों में स्केप्टिसिज्म है कि जितने मल्टीलैटरल प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं और जो ट्रेडिशनली बड़े देश जिनको हम कहते हैं, उन लोगों ने इनको एक तरीके से इनफेक्टिव भी बहुत बनाया है. ऐसे भी ये नॉन बाइंडिंग बॉडी है, ऑब्लिगेटरी बॉडी तो है नहीं. ऐसे में चूंकि इमरजेंसी सिचुएशन है, बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स सिचुएशन है, हम नज कैसे कर सकते हैं, फोर्स कैसे कर सकते हैं कि जो बोलते हो वो करके दिखाओ?
नहीं, देखिए संजय जी, इसमें दो बातें हैं. एक तो वैसे भी कूटनीति, जब आप कूटनीति की बात करते हैं तो वो सामान्य नागरिक के, मैं नहीं कहूँगा गले नहीं उतरता, पर उनके लिए दूर की दुनिया. हाँ, जो आप डिप्लोमेसी, जो बड़े बड़े शब्द हैं, लंबे लंबे सेंटेंसेस हैं, पैराग्राफ्स हैं, जो लोग पढ़ते हैं फिर कहते हैं अच्छा क्या लिखा है, एक बार और समझाओ, तो ये कोई नई बात नहीं. तो इस बार हमारी कोशिश है कि जो G20 में जो भी मुद्दे उठाए जाएंगे, जो बातचीत होगी, ये सामान्य नागरिक को समझना चाहिए. तो हम लोग, प्रधानमंत्री का शुरू से कहना था कि इस G20 को आप कॉन्फ्रेंस हॉल में नहीं रखिए, इसको आप राजधानी में नहीं रखिए, इसको आप पूरे देश में ले जाइए, जो मुद्दे जो हैं सबको समझाइए. तो जब आप मैं उदाहरण देता हूँ आपको. हम फूड सिक्योरिटी की बात करते हैं. क्यों बात कर रहे हैं? क्योंकि यूक्रेन और रूस जो थे, वो जो वीट के बड़े सप्लायर थे. तो जब वीट सप्लाई की अनिश्चितता हुई तो तुरंत मार्केट प्राइसेस तो बढ़ गए. तो जब हम आज मिलेट्स की बात करते हैं, कहते हैं कि मिलेट्स को बढ़ाओ, क्योंकि अगर आप भारत में ही देखिए कि मोटा मोटा हमारा जो वीट प्रोडक्शन है वो करीब 100 मिलियन टन है. जो मिलेट का है वो 16-17 मिलियन टन है. अगर मिलेट्स की प्रोडक्शन, क्योंकि मिलेट्स में कम पानी लगता है, ज़्यादा ग्रीनर क्रॉप है, उसकी न्यूट्रिशन वैल्यू ज़्यादा है, अगर मिलेट्स की उत्पादन आप बढ़ा सकते हैं, आप देखिए आपका न्यूट्रिशन भी इम्प्रूव हो रहा है, आपकी फूड सिक्योरिटी भी इम्प्रूव हो रही है, आपका क्लाइमेट कंट्रीब्यूशन भी हो रहा है. तो ये एक उदाहरण है कि आपने सोल्यूशन भी निकाला और G20 के तहत आपने अपने सोसाइटी, अपने लोगों को भी समझाया. उनको भी लगता है कि वी आर पार्ट ऑफ द सोल्यूशन. जब हम कहते हैं जन भागीदारी, उसका मतलब है कि जो हम वो समय जब फॉरेन पॉलिसी कोई और करता था, कहीं और होता था, वो ज़माना गया. ये अब हम सबकी जिम्मेदारी. और ये मैसेज जो है अभी जो है G20 के प्रायोरिटी क्या है? फूड, एनर्जी, क्लाइमेट. अब क्लाइमेट में भी अगर आप देखें, प्राइम मिनिस्टर का इनिशिएटिव लाइफ इनिशिएटिव का निचोड़ ये है, वो कहते हैं कि देखिए मैं मानता हूँ पावर जनरेशन, एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी, ये सब हैं बड़े रेलेवेंट, ये बहुत माने महत्वपूर्ण नीतियाँ हैं, पर जब तक हम रोज़ का लाइफस्टाइल जब तक हम नहीं बदलेंगे, उसमें हम क्लाइमेट फ्रेंडली प्रैक्टिसेस नहीं लाएंगे, तो इसका आपको समाधान नहीं निकलेगा। तो ये किस्म से हमारी कोशिश है कि जो कॉम्प्लिकेटेड प्रॉब्लम्स हैं उनके सॉल्यूशंस हम उसको कैसे सिंपल बनाएं, कैसे लोगों के मन में इसको माने अब्जॉर्प्शन के एक किस्म से प्रोत्साहन दें, और अगर हम इसको G20 के माध्यम से पूरे दुनिया में इसका प्रचार कर सकते हैं तो मैं कहूँगा हम अपनी कोशिश में सफल रहें।
ये हमारा सेंस ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि हम पीपल्स एक्शन के लेवल पे क्लाइमेट की इस इमरजेंसी से लड़ना चाहते हैं। लेकिन जितने ग्लोबल टॉक शॉप हैं, खास करके वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज जो सबसे बड़े सिनर्स और पोल्यूटर्स हैं, वो हमको लेक्चर भी ज़्यादा करते हैं, वो कमिट करते हैं, फिर क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस भी नहीं देते। तो जो सुनने के लिए रेडी नहीं है या सिर्फ लिप सर्विस करने के लिए रेडी है, इस इमरजेंसी में उनको कंपेल कैसे किया जाए, क्योंकि लगातार हम देख रहे हैं कि ये लोग लेक्चर बहुत कर रहे हैं, लेकिन इनको नहीं पता है कि भारत कैसे सोलर प्रोडक्शन के मामले में, सोलर पावर के मामले में दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा पहला देश बनने जा रहा है। उस रास्ते पर हम हैं। तो ये इनको आप कंपेल कैसे करेंगे? हमको हमेशा विलन बना के रखते हैं।
नहीं, ऐसा तो मैं नहीं कहूँगा। मैं मानता हूँ कि कभी कभी टॉक शॉप्स में ज़्यादा टॉकिंग होती है, वो मैं मानता हूँ। मैं ये भी मानता हूँ कि कभी कभी जो लोग ज्ञान देते हैं वो खुद अपने प्रैक्टिस में उनकी कमी होती है, वो भी मैं मानता हूँ। पर जब तक देखिए, मैं टॉकिंग के ख़िलाफ़ नहीं, क्योंकि हर चीज़ जो है टॉकिंग से ही, तर्क से ही, कन्विक्स से ही आगे बढ़ती। पर हमें क्या करना चाहिए कि अपने एक्शन से, अपने एग्ज़ाम्पल से, जब भारत जो है रिन्यूएबल्स को बढ़ाता है, जब आप LED बल्ब्स के थ्रू एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी आप डेमोन्स्ट्रेट करते हैं, कितना बड़ा परिवर्तन आ सकता है देश में। जब आप देखते हैं कि ग्रीन ट्रांसपोर्टेशन से, मास ट्रांसपोर्टेशन से, जब तो आज इलेक्ट्रिक मोबिलिटी की यहाँ सीरियसली बात हो रही है, तो एक तो हमें करके भी दिखाना है। तो हमें जहाँ जो डिबेटिंग फोरम है वहाँ हमें ज़रूर डिबेट करना है, हमें मैदान नहीं छोड़ना उसमें। जो डिबेटिंग के जो रिज़ल्ट जो हैं, जैसे अब पेरिस में तय हुआ था कि $100 बिलियन की एनुअल कमिटमेंट होगी, अब हुई नहीं, वो अलग बात, पर हमें ये बार बार दोहराना है, लोगों को माने शर्मिंदा करना है इस कि ये आपका वायदा था, आपने नहीं किया। तो हम हैं, हम अकेले नहीं हैं, हमारे साथ 125 देश और हैं जो हम बॉयज़ ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ कहते हैं। तो हम, क्योंकि हम एक डेवलपिंग कंट्री हैं, G20 के सदस्य हैं, हम एक किस्म से ये वॉइस ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ हमारी जिम्मेदारी है। और ये खाली ये जिम्मेदारी हमने, वी हैव नॉट असाइंड इट टू आवरसेल्व्स, वी हैव कंसल्टेड 125 countries. No other G20 chair went through the exercise of asking 125 countries, so please sit down, tell us what is your worry, because you are not on the table. So उनके साइड से हम जो हैं मुद्दे क्या रखेंगे, this is today very very central, and particularly when it comes to climate, that because climate situations are getting worse. जो आप हर अपने देश में हम देख रहे हैं, पड़ोस में देख रहे हैं, दुनिया भर देख रहे हैं। हम लोग अभी ग्रीस में थे 2-3 दिन पहले। There are big wildfires of a kind which they have never seen. So and this is not a different department. हमें ये भी सोचना चाहिए, ये ग्लोबलाइज्ड दुनिया है। Today climate emergencies, climate disasters, they have because they are happening more regularly, because they are happening more strongly, they have become a major economic disruptor. That one of the problems of globalization, the way globalization is today, something is produced there, something else is produced there. But if your supply chains are interrupted because of climate factors, today your whole economy can be jeopardized by climate events.
Global South, the definition and the composition some critics are kind of confused, or they are wondering whether this is a logical formation in wake of BRIC summit. China is also expanding. G20, you want to make it the global economic cooperation platform as a main platform, besides other multilateral institutions. So how do we hope that Global South will be a force to reckon with, and Global North will actually engage and get the sense of responsibility that we want to see in them?
Now, what do you mean people are confused? I mean, who is confused? We are not,
because it is not developing countries only. There are many developed countries with cross interests like China.
No, see, those who are Global South know inside that they are Global South.
China.
Let me repeat. Those who are really Global South know really inside that they are Global South. Why do they know? Because at the end of the day, Global South is partly a reflection of development, obviously a reflection of income, a reflection of history, you know, what happened to them 100 years ago, 200 years ago. But at the end of the day, Global South is a place in the heart. You have to behave like Global South to be part of Global South. So people will judge. Anybody can say we are Global South. Question is, do you behave like Global South? And by Global South, to me, Global South is a country which is in the middle of its the vaccine program, that while we are vaccinating our own people, we are willing to share with others. We are Global South are those who, whatever their limited resources, they will do things for other countries, because there is that feeling today that we are you know, part of a family, that your problems are my problems. So I would say Global South to me is partly income, partly mindset, partly heart, partly performance on the ground. So if you look today at India, you know, people do say, you know, I have been to other countries where what we did during COVID has, even today people remember it. Not governments remember it. People on the street remember it. True. That I've been to parts of Latin America where I've been stopped on the street by people who cannot, with whom even language is not common, but who will indicate in some form that they care at that time they were with us. So to me, the issue, you know, the challenge is this. Global South is also, there is a sense of solidarity and a conviction which will make you do it in an emergency. So right. Who shares even limited resources is a very important thing.
So आपने कोविड का जिक्र किया, तो ये जो पूरा पब्लिक डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है उस पर आप लोग काफ़ी एम्फेसिस दे रहे हैं. हम समझते हैं कि हमारे डिप्लोमेटिक आर्सेनल में ये एक बहुत बड़ा वीपन है जिसको हम यूज़ कर सकते हैं अपनी दोस्तियां बढ़ाने में. इस पर क्या काम चल रहा है इस वक्त? हम समझते हैं कि बहुत सारे देश इसको लेना चाहते होंगे.
देखिए, जब मैं दौरे में जाता हूँ दुनिया भर, जब विदेश मंत्री जाते ही हैं बाहर, हमारा काम ही बाहर है, तो ये बात जो है मैं देख रहा हूँ पिछले सालों में बहुत सारे देश हमसे बात करते हैं कि वो तो उनके लिए एक आश्चर्यजनक भी है, पर उनको लगता है कि भाई हमें आप जो आपका एक्सपीरियंस है हमें भी बताइए. और जो बहुत सारे चीज़ जो हैं वो माने खाली भारत में नहीं होते. अब जो लीकेज जो हो रहा था, ये हमारे यहाँ लीकेज हो रहा था पहले, बट ये हाँ उनके यहाँ भी होता है. तो जब वो देखते हैं कि जैसे अब हम जो अनाज की डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन जो करते हैं, या हेल्थ कवरेज जो होती है, या हाउसिंग जो होता है, तो हमारे जो स्कीम्स जो हैं और जिस एफिशिएंसी से ये स्कीम्स जो होती हैं, जिस स्केल से ये स्कीम जो होती, उनके लिए एक किस्म से ये मैं कहूँगा उदाहरण भी है, पर उनको लगता है, उनको प्रोत्साहित भी करता है,
ज़रूरत भी है,
ज़रूरत है, पर उनको लगता है कि ये संभव है क्योंकि भारत ने करके दिखाया है। तो हम जो हैं टुडे वी आर एक्चुअली इन मैनी वेज, यू नो, I would say it should come out right. I mean, in a way, example भी है, motivation भी है, solidarity भी है, और ये है कि in a way it's a new method of solving old problems.
Right.
That in many cases, our delivery जो है, it is commensurate with that of the most developed parts of the world. So there is today a lot of interest in digital India, in digital based delivery. People look at the numbers. Okay. Let us take Anna Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, food support program. Our food support program covers 800 million people. Yeah. Okay. 800 million people is twice the size of Europe. It's almost the size of entire Africa. Today, if you look at Jan Dhan covers 500 million people, 50 crores. Yeah. That is, 50 crores is half the size of Africa.
True.
Okay. If you look even at something like Awas Yojana, that today, if you look at beneficiaries of Awas Yojana, that's 150 million people who got houses.
Right. This is astonishing data that 4 billion people do not have an identity card or identity number. So India can really do a lot globally.
No, one part of it is to build identity, to build the digital delivery, to have in place the systems, to have the leadership and the visualization of this, and have the commitment to do that. So if you look at any of our programs, you know, our programs are actually, every program, I can give you a country which will relate. You know, you look at our Ujjwala program, that is the size of the population of Germany.
Right.
You look at even our Awas Yojana. Awas Yojana is the size of, it's like housing entire Japan. So every one of our programs is actually the size of a country. As I said, you know, Anna Yojana is like feeding North America and Europe at the same time. So we have to understand, other countries today are watching us. See, part of G20, because I'd like to come back to G20. Why is it 125 countries were so I would say, committed and interested in talking to us? Because they feel that a country like India, which understands the problem of the developing world, which has that sense of sincerity and a willingness to table those issues, which is today calling a conference, because Pradhan Mantri ने ये Voice of Global South conference बुलाया था, 125 देश आए थे उनके लिए, 125 nations came. In the entire G20, we've never had a G20 chair who called all the countries not in the G20 and said, please come sit with me and tell me what are your problems, because I want to take your problems out there and put it before the rest of the G20. That is a very new
phenomena, yeah. Absolutely.
So, see, part of it is they look at our heart. Part of it is they look at our performance. Part of it is they look at our ideas. Today it is our ideas, our enthusiasm, our willingness, our sincerity. I think these are on demonstration. This is our credibility today.
Absolutely. आपसे बहुत सारे इश्यूज़ हैं G20 से रिलेटेड ही बात करने के लिए, लेकिन हमारे डिस्टिंग्विश्ड गेस्ट भी हैं, उनके साथ भी आपका इंटरेक्शन करेंगे. लेकिन कुछ सवाल फिर भी मुझे आपसे मैं पूछना चाहता हूं, इसके पहले कि हम लोग ऑडियंसेस से सवाल लें. पहली चीज़ ये है कि जिस तरीके से G20 का अभी तक कन्वर्सेशन चला है, उसमें जॉइंट कम्युनिके कितना फिजिबल लगता है, खास करके तब जबकि ठीक इसके पहले चाइना फिर एक मैप रिलीज़ करके जिसको कहते हैं इरिटेशन खड़ा करना, वो कोशिश कर रहा है कि अक्साई चीन, अरुणाचल उसका पार्ट है. हम बहुत माइंडफुल हैं इस बात के लिए कि G20 इकोनॉमिक कॉपरेशन का एजेंडा है और वहाँ हमको साइड ट्रैक नहीं होना चाहिए. फिर भी ये चाइना ओवरहैंग तो जाने वाला नहीं है.
नहीं, देखिए ये अलग अलग विषय है, और कुछ लोग जो हैं हमारे यहाँ एम्बेसडर्स भी हैं, तो मैं इनको इसलिए मैं इंग्लिश में मैं समझाना चाहता हूँ. So the question really was twofold. One is, in a sense, where is the G20 going? Will you get a communique? That essentially was one part of it. And the second was reference to map, in the inverted commas are mine, which was put out by China. So here is the answer. Where the G20 is concerned, you know, we as chair, as a very consultative chair and a very committed chair, we have held many meetings. We have tried to build a consensus. Many G20 ambassadors are here in the room, and they know. They have sat themselves in many of these meetings. So I am very confident that when we reach the G20 summit, that the collectively within the G20, there will be a shared interest in coming out with a common solution and a common statement about all the key problems of the world. And we certainly from our side will do everything to make that possible. I'm very confident that that will happen. It is a process right now. The second issue, जो आपका सवाल था वो
about the
map
that they have released today.
So this is this map which China has put out. Look, China has even in the past put out maps which claim the territories which are not China's, which belong to other countries. This is an old habit of theirs. It is not something which is new. It started in the 1950s. So just by putting out a map claiming territories, some of which are part of India, I think doesn't make that. I mean, these are very much part of India. So I would say, but I would not relate the two countries. I think we are very clear. We are very clear what our territories are. This government is very clear about what we need to defend our territories. You can already see that on our borders. So I think there should be no doubt about that. Just making absurd claims doesn't make other people's territory yours. Let's be very clear on that.
Agreed. But then where does it put us in terms of the 1920 rounds of conversations that we had with them on disengagement? So what's happening on that?
No, that's a different issue. That the disengagement talks are pertaining to the line of actual control. This is a map issue. I mean, this is not the first time they issued a map, as you know that they've been good. So I think there are two different issues. The disengagement talks, what is going on there.
Are you hopeful?
Which?
About disengagement conversations, are you hopeful?
I'm a person who spent a lifetime in diplomacy. Only hopeful and optimistic people come to diplomacy. So, there is no problem. There's no problem, I believe, we cannot solve. It is, and when I am representing in diplomacy 1.4 crore Indians, 140 crore Indians, I think there should be no doubt about that. Because, look, as a nation of 1.4 billion people today, we have a weight in the world. We have an influence in the world. We stand for something. So it isn't just, you raise it in the context of the boundary issues. But I go back to your G20 question. People look at us and say, here is a country, 1.4 billion people, 140 crore Indians. When they have done things, there was a time where say, what we have done for developing world, it has an impact. I think today, not only for the developing world, a lot of what we have done in digital, I think today is also an example for the developed world. That we have been able to show delivery in housing, delivery in health, delivery in farmers programs, which is riding on a digital backbone. We are a living example today of the power of technology and what it can do to the lives of people.
Since we were talking about China, so in a manner of speaking, China was the place where you met Prime Minister Modi for the first time, if I'm not wrong. And you mentioned about your career as diplomat. Uh, we all are curious, and this question is being posed to you every time, but still we also want to know in little more deeper manner. Uh, how does he work on the subjects like foreign policy? And what is different about PM Modi, because you have worked with many other prime ministers?
You know, how does he work on foreign policy? He has a lot of interest, I must tell you. And not just now. I mean, I first met him in 2011. In 2011, he was there for a few days. I was then in China as ambassador. I found him very interested, very insightful, but very willing to learn. So it was a mix of all of that. And since then, last 10 years, I travel a lot with him. When I travel with him also, a lot of his travels are constantly trying to understand, okay, वहाँ क्या हो रहा है, इन्होंने कैसे किया, what is new here. So he's constantly looking, you can say like a best practices, because he's a very, someone very committed to building India, but at the same time very technology friendly, very open-minded, always willing to see, okay, what is it, how is it, somebody has done something, which he can then in some way apply out here. So I find him a very, he's a person with great curiosity and a great, very open to this willingness to learn new things. In terms of how overall foreign policy has happened, he gives a lot of time to it, because today it is a globalized world.
Sorry, let me ask this question again. For example, the way he came up with a clear thought on what he's going to do as a country on Russia-Ukraine war, that actually makes us wonder that many a times he is much more strategic, very bold, and sometimes he astonishes us by his understanding of the global politics.
Well, you could say that. I may not say it now in 2023, because I've seen in last 10 years that he clearly has a very strong understanding of global politics, so it doesn't astonish me. So, but say, but it's a good example you gave. Just that one sentence. ये युद्ध का युग नहीं है. Which basically that this is not an era of conflict. I mean, this is what he said when he was meeting President Putin in Samarkand. I mentioned to you because, in a way, if I were to take a single sentence of global sentiment, see, global sentiment today does not envisage conflict or war as a solution, because it has so many consequences for everybody's life. So, I would say he, in that one sentence, articulated what were the views of very diverse countries. So, my take, very honestly, is here is a person, because, see, to be very honest, I met him for the first time in 2011. I got to know him really well only after I became Foreign Secretary. I did not know how much he had traveled before, what his experiences were, how much he had picked up, what his connections were. I mean, I'm still amazed at the people that he knows, the places that he's been. He will say, I remember, acha main wahan gaya tha, mera wo anubhav tha. So, there is a lot to him which perhaps only those who know him well really get. Now, since I've had the privilege of working for the last 10 years, I can say, okay, I know him a little bit better than I did 10 years ago. So there is a lot of, for him, interest in the world. I mean, if you look even at the way we've handled G20, look at our motto, the idea of one family, of one future. Look at the fact that we consulted 125 people. We did our presidency. We are doing our presidency in a truly global manner. That today you actually have someone who's thought this through and said, when I go out there, I'm not only speaking for 1.4 billion Indians, but I'm also speaking for 125 other countries because they're not on the table and they need somebody to speak for them.
नहीं, G20 का तो जो स्केल है वो बिल्कुल ही बदल गया है और आने वाली जो प्रेसिडेंसीज होंगी अलग अलग देशों के पास उनको मैच करना पड़ेगा, ये भी एक चैलेंज होगा। एक चीज़ और, अभी चूंकि आप ट्रैवल कर रहे थे ब्रिक्स समिट के दौरान, तो वहाँ पर जब चंद्रयान वाला किस्सा हुआ तो हमने ऐसे ही सुना थोड़ा बहुत कहीं से कि एक तरफ आपका ब्रिक्स समिट चल रहा है, दूसरे सारे मसले चल रहे हैं, चंद्रयान का लैंडिंग हो गया है, उसमें उनका फोकस इक्वली चंद्रयान वाले पर भी लगा हुआ था। तो हम उस नरेंद्र मोदी के बारे में थोड़ा जानना चाहते हैं, व्हाट वाज ही डूइंग?
You know, it was a very interesting experience because we arrived in Johannesburg the first day. So the first event was a business event. I didn't go because we had a foreign ministers meeting. Then there was a retreat. The leaders came for a retreat. So already by the time we reached retreat, there was a little bit of talking had started. Chandrayaan is going to happen, landing is going to happen. The next day was actually, we did a morning session, and then the Prime Minister left the session because he wanted to join ISRO, given the strong sort of bonding that he has with them. But by the second day, already, even in the BRICS, the talk had shifted to Chandrayaan. It was, so I actually had a room, where the entire room, in fact, I remember at one time, there was a big screen like out there in the corner. So it was very difficult to talk without being distracted by the screen, because screen was, so at some stage, the Prime Minister, the President of South Africa said, Foreign Minister, you look like the Chandrayaan is up there. You keep looking up there. So I think it had got into people's imagination and attention. And that evening, I must tell you, we had, because the BRICS Plus, so you had about 50 other countries, presidents, prime ministers who joined. So the speech which President Ramaphosa gave, and it was like, the Chandrayaan was like a collective, everybody felt part of it. In fact, he said that. He said, I'm going to sit next to Prime Minister Modi, and I hope some of it will rub off onto me. So that kind of sentiment was very strong. And in fact, at one stage, I remember there was a long table, a U-shaped table, maybe 150 people were sitting there. And people just spontaneously got up. So Prime Minister actually had to go the length of the table, individually shaking hands, accepting. You had that sense in the BRICS that this was not just India's achievement, that very large part of the world was with us. That, as President Ramaphosa said, your achievement we see as our achievement. We hope, given India, that there is an expectation in the rest of the world that we are a kind of country, we will share, we will, in a sense, help with other people's capacities. So people do see it as a bigger event.
Right. अब लोगों के सवाल ने, उसके पहले मेरा एक आखिरी सवाल आपसे और है, शायद उसके बाद फिर एक दो सवाल और। वो ये कि ये जो B20 पर आपकी स्पीच और प्राइम मिनिस्टर की स्पीच, दोनों में बहुत सारी पोटेंशियल नई बातें सामने आई हैं। लगता है कि एक ग्लोबल कन्वर्सेशन को यू विल इम्पैक्ट इन अ डिफरेंट वे नाउ। तो उन्होंने एक बात कही ग्रीन क्रेडिट की, और उसके साथ ये भी कहा कि कार्बन क्रेडिट के आगे की बात करें, और कार्बन क्रेडिट का बहुत लोग मज़े भी ले रहे हैं। इसका क्या मतलब था?
नहीं, देखिए, मैं नहीं कहूँगा, ये जो प्रधानमंत्री के मन में है, वो जब वो स्पष्ट करना चाहते हैं वो बिल्कुल करते हैं, जब वो थोड़ा इसको ओपेक रखना चाहते हैं वो भी जानबूझ के रखते हैं, पर उसको आप छोड़िए। हमारा जो वहाँ लक्ष्य था, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट दी B20 मीटिंग्स। अभी जो है, जो B20 के सामने जो मुख्य विषय जो है, एक तो है सप्लाई चेन का, कि सप्लाई चेन जो हम कहते हैं कंसंट्रेशन, कि दुनिया में आज अगर आप देखेंगे मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एक किस्म से ओवर कंसंट्रेटेड है। कुछ क्षेत्रों में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग है, बहुत सारे क्षेत्रों में नहीं है। पैंडेमिक ने ये साबित किया है कि ऐसी स्थिति जो है दुनिया की इकोनॉमी को एक आपत्ति में डाल देती है, क्योंकि भगवान न करे कुछ डिसरप्शन हो जाता है तो पूरी दुनिया एक किस्म से इसका परिणाम उनको भोगना पड़ता है। तो अभी जो है, जो मेन इश्यूज अगर आप देखेंगे, एक है कि जो इकोनॉमी में कि आप सप्लाई चेन्स को कैसे रेसिलिएंट करें, और इसकी जो एक किस्म से इसको डेमोक्रेटाइज आप कैसे कर सकते हैं। डिजिटल डोमेन में आप ट्रांसपेरेंसी और ट्रस्ट को कैसे बढ़ा सकते हैं। सस्टेनेबिलिटी में आप कैसे ग्रीन ग्रोथ को प्रोत्साहित कर सकते हैं। और इसमें कुछ देश जो हैं वो अपना, माने एक किस्म से वो अपना इसको एक बिजनेस बना रहे हैं। और जो सचमुच जो ग्रीन ग्रोथ जो होना चाहिए, और ये हमारी पुरानी शिकायत है और खाली हमारी नहीं है, पूरी विकासशील दुनिया की शिकायत है कि अगर आप देखें पेरिस में जो कमिटमेंट हुआ कि हर साल आप कम से कम $100 बिलियन देंगे। अब हम सब जानते हैं कि परफॉर्मेंस आप देखिए कि वहाँ तो कमिटमेंट सब ने दे दिया, और उसके बाद बहुत क्रिएटिव अकाउंटिंग हो रहा था कि भाई ये भी डालो वो भी डालो, कहीं ना कहीं किसी तरीके से हम 100 तक पहुँच जाए। तो ये तो उनका मुझे लगता है कि ओवरऑल हमारी मैसेजिंग थी कि G20 को ग्लोबल साउथ के जो विषय जो हैं उन पे बल देना चाहिए। जब तक डेट, ट्रेड, इन्वेस्टमेंट फ्लो, ट्रांसपेरेंट कनेक्टिविटी, डिजिटल इक्विटी, जेंडर गैप्स की सॉल्यूशन, सस्टेनेबल लाइफस्टाइल, ये हैं विषय। तो इन सब का सॉल्यूशन निकलना चाहिए। और अगर G20 जैसे ग्रुपिंग जो दुनिया के सबसे शक्तिशाली 20 देश हैं, अगर वो इसको लीड नहीं दे पाएंगे तो कौन देगा?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल। अब हम लेते हैं कुछ ऑडियंसेस के सवाल। ओवर टू प्रियांश।
Thanks very much, sir. Thanks, sir, for answering those questions. The first question is by Ambassador Philip Green, Australia's High Commissioner to India. Thanks very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am. And let me first say, Minister, how much I agree with your comments about your chairing of the G20. It's been very ambitious, but also designed to listen carefully and to bring consensus. As you know, sir, I am new in your country. And one of the ways I'm trying to learn about your country is to read your book, The India Way.
All right. I can suggest better ways. But
if I may quote from your book, you write, "The India of the Mahabharata era was also multipolar, with its leading powers balancing each other. But once competition between its two major poles could not be contained, others, perforce, had to take sides." Are we approaching a similar time in our world? And would India be ready to take sides?
I hope not, meaning I hope not to the first part of the question, which is I hope we are not approaching such a situation. I actually think we're not approaching such a situation. I think the world is getting more multipolar. If I were to give you India's own example, a few decades ago, but not so long ago actually, we would be, say, number 10 hierarchically in terms of the nominal size of our economy. Today we are number 5. So the fact that in fact a G7 today has yielded place to G20 itself tells you the world is becoming more multipolar. So I don't think today global decisions are any more a prerogative of a small group, nor are they a prerogative of 2 countries. Okay? So yes, I accept that in the world there is, a particular country is number 1 in terms of size and influence, another country may be number 2. But I don't think today 1 and 2 have the weight and the influence and the clout and the standing that they can control the entire international system. In fact, I would argue the opposite, that the world is getting more regionalized, that if you look at the relative weight of the 3, 4, 5, all the way to 20 and beyond 20, that in fact they have a much greater say today in the world than they had before. So I would say the kind of analysis which the situation which happened in the Mahabharata, I don't think will happen in the world today. I think we are genuinely heading for a much more multipolar world, which will require a kind of a much more nimbler diplomacy. It'll not be obviously this world will have its frictions and problems, but that kind of sharp polarization, I think that's of a different era.
Thanks very much, Dr. S. Jaishankar, for that answer. And thanks very much, Ambassador Green, for the question. Our next question is by Lieutenant General Satish Sua, the former Chief of Integrated Defence Staff. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for a very excellent, what should I say, decoding. Sir, allow me to take you away from G20, only to bring us back to it. The United Nations Security Council reforms seem to be a distant dream. India and a couple of other countries, it seems, are not likely to be inducted as permanent members. Coming back to G20, now the G20, as you've just explained, and we've all been experiencing over the past 1 year, the government has actually, the Indian government has very imaginatively and skillfully, adroitly turned this G20 into G120, 125 actually. India is also increasingly becoming the voice of the global south. Is there a likelihood of the G20 gaining importance at the expense of United Nations, which is getting increasingly marginalized anyway, even if I'm overstating it? I do realize that G20 initially started as an economic grouping, but that too can change. Your comments, sir.
First of all, where the UN Security Council and UN reform is concerned, it's not going to be easy, but I would urge you not to be pessimistic, because the really big achievements do take time, they take hard work, they take a lot of negotiation, and I'll give you a very good example of it. We've just had a BRICS summit in Johannesburg. If you look at the summit declaration, for the first time, there is an explicit membership reference to Security Council memberships, ships in plural. So, and there is a specific reference to India, Brazil, and South Africa. So, it is not that, this is something which is stuck and which is not moving. Yes, it is moving slowly. Yes, we would like the intergovernmental negotiations in New York to pick up pace, and we want it to be text-based. We want people to be more outcome-oriented. But in diplomacy is not for impatient people. It's something you have to plug away and keep plugging away. It's in some ways almost as patient as the army. So, but the question about G20, what we are seeing, unfortunately, in many ways, is a gridlock in the Security Council on some issues. Even before the Ukraine conflict started, we actually felt that the Security Council no longer authentically represented the entirety of the membership. I mean, if what I can say today, the most populous country of the world is not there, if Africa, 54 nations of Africa are not there, if Latin America is not there, if, so there are, the fact that it's anachronistic is very visible. So today, I think that pressure for change, because that pressure for change was also visible even at the BRICS, which is why you are now beginning to see the evolution of positions out there. So G20 will pursue its mandate, and its mandate is global growth and development. The United Nations and the United Nations Security Council has its mandate. The Security Council particularly has a mandate of ensuring international peace and security. One cannot substitute for the other. And I would caution against, transposing problems and agenda of one onto the other. I think each have a place, each have a contribution. They need to do that. You cannot fix the UN by saying, let's go and do the job elsewhere. That will not fix the UN. It will actually make for a weak and increasingly ineffective UN, which is the direction in which we see it going right now. So at some stage, I think the members of the UN themselves have to wake up to the realization that the longer they put off reforms, the less representative the Security Council is. Frankly, the less the credibility of the UN would be. People will then go and do things outside the UN. Not necessarily in the G20, they'll go and do it in other ways as well outside the UN.
Thanks very much, sir, for that. And we also have a leading business voice of the country. Mr. Gaurav Dalmia is among us, who's the chairperson of the Dalmia Group Holdings. Sir, over to you for your question.
So may I step away from diplomacy to commercial aspects of globalization? Last year, China's exports fell by 22%. And we're all betting on China plus one kind of uptick for India. India's manufacturing exports fell by 12% as well during that same period. So we, a bunch of businessmen who discuss global macro, were wondering what the solution to this is. Obviously, domestic productivity is one, more FTAs maybe another. What recipe do you see for India to be a much bigger player in the global supply chain?
I'm not questioning your figures, but like any figures, I think it's very important to drill down and draw the right conclusions. I don't think India should be depicted as a China plus one. I don't think you're being fair to yourself. I would say countries will invest in India, we ourselves will invest in India when we actually show our capability, our competitiveness, we create the infrastructure, we have the human skills, we have the institutional basis to become a modern economy which is contributing more to the global economy. And that is essentially what we've been trying to do for the last decade. Because what quite honestly happened earlier was it was almost as though we had given up on manufacturing. You had this narrative which said, oh, we're great on services, which was a cop-out, very frankly, of manufacturing capability. Now, in the last decade, you've seen a different direction. You've seen a conscious effort at creating the requisite infrastructure, which is articulated in the Gati Shakti initiative. You have seen developments like the performance production-linked incentives. The idea is to get world-class business into India. You have seen a recapitalization of banks and a credit support policy to business. And you have seen an overall easier to make it do business climate, which frankly contrasted with what at that time was an unspoken making it harder to do business climate. So this, the world will come to India not because India is a China plus one, but because India has the capacities and the capability, the international credibility and the capability which will make us a good destination, and I think that is happening. Now, obviously there will be geopolitics in play, and the geopolitics will make a lot of international businesses hedge more. But I think it's important for us not to be complicit, to continue the path which we have done since 2014, to find ways of today growing manufacturing in this country, because at the end of the day, this is pro-employment policy. You cannot give jobs to people if you do not have expanded manufacturing in this country. And those who claim to, have to be pro-poor, when you look at what they were doing with industrialization and manufacturing and infrastructure, I think you could see what the disconnect was out there. So today, I do feel there is a big opportunity for us because why is the opportunity? One, the world wants more supply chains. It wants redundant, resilient, reliable supply chains. The world does not want to see concentrated manufacturing in limited geographies. The world wants to see trust and transparency when it comes to digital business. The world wants business to be business. It's sensitive about, how business is handled politically by various states. I think all those things work in our favor today. So we have this opportunity before us, but that opportunity will not realize itself automatically. That would be a big mistake on our part, which we are fortunately not making. I think today we are trying to take full advantage of this. And if you look, whether it is starting with the quality, the human indices, the literacy, the skills, the digital, the manufacturing, the easier to do business, the easier for living. All these are part of a total package which will make us a stronger industrial power. That's the direction that we're going.
Thanks very much, sir, for that.
Sir, here I want to push a bit on this point. How inviting are we for international private business capital to come into India? Because we talk to many people and we hear their concerns that it is really, we need to do a lot to make it inviting country.
Yes, what you are saying is correct. But if you were to ask me, have we done a lot in the last 10 years? My answer would be yes. Do we have to do more in the next 10 years? My answer would be yes. If you say in the past, could we have done better? I think there were real, mistakes and shortcomings on our part. Now, from 14, we have started in many cases, especially on the economic field, we have started to rectify, policies which made it hard for people to not just to manufacture in this country, to employ in this country. People often put this in terms of business. I also put it to you, to me, business and employment are two sides of the same coin. The people who are blocking infrastructure, people who are blocking business, were also people who are blocking employment in this country. And today, I would say, this is how to become more competitive, how to create, how to bring in jobs, how not bring in yesterday's jobs. We just recently came out of a US visit. For me, one of the big achievements was if we could get 3 world-class companies in America to come and say, okay, India is the place where we're going to go and put up a semiconductor, in one case assembly and testing, in another case it was an engineering, third case it was an HR. That is what this is all about.
Yeah, it was a personal delight because Applied Material Factory, I visited only 28 years ago, and the thought that time was that when will we see these things happening in India? 28 years late, but nevertheless, it is a good start.
Well, if it is any consolation, I'll give you an even older story. We got a General Electric, the understanding that General Electric would come and make an aircraft engine along with HAL. I was there in 1986 when we actually had a delegation from India which came to General Electric. Dr. Kalam was part of the delegation. It was led by Dr. Arunachalam, who just passed away. From 1986, it was our endeavor to see if we can actually get aircraft engine technology transferred to India and to make engines there. So, yes, a lot of these have been long pending problems, but I think today, look, we are in a very interesting position in the world today. The G20 in many ways symbolizes this. The world sees us today, and if I were to give you 4 or 5 examples, with this whole buzz about Chandrayaan, genuinely, I mean it. People are very excited about Chandrayaan. And the fact that it went close to the South Pole, it was a very difficult mission. If you talk today to people about 5G and say India is today deploying its 5G stack at a very rapid pace. I went through this whole COVID experience. It wasn't just the vaccine. It was equally the COVID platform. The fact that we could organize in a systematic way without any marpeat for 1.4 billion people to have their vaccination. It was, a lot of the world saw it as a marvel. So to me, the semiconductor, engine technology, I see a lot of other things coming our way. But what it requires on our side are the right policies. It requires progress on the ground. It doesn't mean, it means getting it right and implementing it on the ground. And I would suggest to you, it is the credibility of the last 10 years that we now see pay off. We now see payoff, whether it is applied materials, whether it's a General Electric, or whether it is the fact that 125 countries came and met us and said, please put forward our position at the G20.
Right. And the one thing that we don't discuss, that this conversation will not be complete, is about our neighbors, and especially the neighborhood policy in the context of, I'm asking this in the context of few countries, specifically like Nepal or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Vietnam, or I will add Israel to this list. Lot of action has taken place. How do you put this whole thing in perspective? Because this is a new paradigm.
I'll put it to you like this. You have, we are India, okay? So naturally for us, we are the center of a scheme. We have around us the immediate neighborhood. So Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka would fall in that immediate neighborhood. What we are trying to show to that immediate neighborhood is, as the biggest country of the neighborhood, as the largest economy, we are happy to work with you so that together the entire neighborhood can be more secure and more prosperous. So this is what we call neighborhood first policy. As a result of which today, if you see, power, roads, waterways, even number of people going up and down, all that has very, very significantly improved. Then if you go beyond that immediate neighborhood in each of the directions, so you go towards the Gulf and what we call West Asia, Israel is part of that, or you go north towards Central Asia, or you go south, Indian Ocean, we have a policy there called Sagar, or east to look east. So think of India at the center, think of a circle, which is neighborhood first, and then go in 4 directions. So you can see Sagar in the south, Act East in the east, link west towards the Gulf and West Asia, and Central Asia Connect, which you see up there. Then beyond that, we are trying to engage the major powers, go into Africa very much deeper, and start building a global footprint today. This, our idea, what Prime Minister calls Amrit Kaal. In Amrit Kaal, in that 25 years, we should not only be a developed country, we should also be a global polity. And to do that, it will take 25 years of preparation. So if you look today at Latin America, in fact, just think of it. Prime Minister was recently in Pacific Islands. Papua New Guinea gaya the, aapko yaad hoga. Or you see today, our activities in Latin America or Central America. Or you look at Mongolia, or we do a Nordic summit. So we are laying the groundwork, because it will take us 25 years of painstaking work with a vision, an ambition, a plan for this to be achieved. And here, whether it's a G20, whether it's a BRICS, whether it's a Quad, these are all building blocks to where we are going. So that's the ambition, that's the scale, that's the direction in which we want to go.
आप लोगों का मिडिल ईस्ट एजेंडा भी काफ़ी बिजी और काफ़ी एक्टिव है, और हम समझते हैं कि ये भी काम वर्क इन प्रोग्रेस था जो पहले होना चाहिए था. हमको लगता है कि आने वाले दिनों में
चीज़ें होने चाहिए.
बिल्कुल, आने वाले दिनों में मुझे लगता है कि यहाँ बहुत कुछ एक्शन हम और देखेंगे. किस तरह के डीपर इंगेजमेंट, डीपर टाइज हम देखने वाले हैं?
It's very interesting. if you look at the Gulf, Middle East overall or Gulf, you had a country like UAE, where really almost for 40 years, no Prime Minister of India had gone. Okay. I mean, we discovered, again, Egypt Prime Minister recently. But so these are not small countries. These are very crucial countries. So what had happened is we either saw them as energy source, we saw them to some degree as maybe employment destinations, but the total comprehensive view and fitting them into what is a global plan, global strategy, I think that wasn't there. So if you see today the amount of attention, when people ask me, so tell me what is the change of the last 10 years? For me, one of the big changes of the last 10 years is actually how much attention we have given to West Asia or the Middle East, as you call it, specifically to the Gulf. And there are some countries. I mean, Israel is a very unique country. I mean, the fact is, we should all ask ourselves, why did it take till 2017 for the first Indian Prime Minister to go to Israel? I mean, this is a country which became independent in 1948. I think it is a question, in all honesty, we should ask ourselves and reflect on that answer.
Right. आप लोगों की फॉरेन पॉलिसी का एक सबसे बड़ा सक्सेस क्या आप जानते हैं कि मीडिया का कोई भी कन्वर्सेशन, ऐसी कोई भी बातचीत आजकल पाकिस्तान के बिना पूरी हो जाती है. लेकिन हम लोग हैं मिस्चीवियस लोग.
मैंने सोचा कि आप रुकने वाले हैं उसके बाद.
मैंने सोचा था कि एक्चुअली कि पूछूं कि ना पूछूं, लेकिन थोड़ा मिस्चीफ तो बनता है. तो अभी हम 13 अगस्त को श्रीनगर में थे, लेफ्टिनेंट गवर्नर मनोज सिन्हा से बात कर रहे थे, तो वहाँ एक नारा लग रहा था कि आर हो या पार कश्मीर हमारा है. तो मैंने, गवर्नर उसको लीड कर रहे थे, तो मैंने उनसे पूछा कि ये नारा आपकी रैली में लगा है, तो क्या कहते हैं आप? तो बोला, मैं नहीं कहूँगा, ये विषय विदेश मंत्रालय का है. तो ओवर टू यू.
नहीं, देखिए ऐसा है, एक तो जो आपने कहा कि आजकल अगर पाकिस्तान की बात जो है कम हो रही है, तो इसको मैं क्या कहूँ, एक किस्म से यू कैन से इट इज़ अ वर्डिक्ट ऑफ द मार्केट. आई मीन, लूजिंग स्टॉक में कौन बात करता है? तो और जो कश्मीर की जो बात कर रहे हैं, देखिए ऑनेस्टली I was a member of cabinet in 2019. I was involved in the decisions which were taken. One part of me is still amazed how we put up with the situation till 2019. How could we have allowed this to happen? And right now, I mean, I just had a very, very close friend who came back, and that person herself is from Kashmir. And I actually told her, I said, you want to see the change? Go to Lal Chowk and come back and tell me what you have seen, because she had not been before 2019. So you see today, what injustice, I mean, forget about everything else. Actually, we kept that state backward for reasons of politics. And I had gone there when I joined the government in 1979. हम लोगों की वो फौज के साथ attachment होती है, तो I went to Uri, so I'd gone to Srinagar, stayed there, went to Baramulla. So the first time I had a chance, I said, I want to go to the same place where I went in 1979. And I was amazed between 1979 and 2019 how little had changed, and how many things had happened in the rest of India which I did not find in that part of the world. And, so the fact is that for me, from a foreign policy perspective, I saw how the rest of the world used this issue to pressurize us, to damage us, to tighten us when they wanted. And I would say, certainly in these 5 years, if people ask me list some key achievements, I certainly would put how we countered COVID as one of the key achievements. But I would say the article, what we did with Article 370, I would definitely put it because I think it has long-term, benefits and the rest of the world. Today when I go around the world, I mean, everybody sort of accepts it. It is only we who had this fear कि नहीं पता नहीं दुनिया क्या कहेगी. आपने एक बार कुछ मन बना लिया, दुनिया understood exactly what you were about.
बिल्कुल, ये आपने सही कहा कि हम लोग दुनिया क्या कहेगी, शुभ शुभ बोलना चाहिए, उस तरह की डिप्लोमेसी को बहुत वक्त तक परस्यू करते रहे. तो क्या अभी हम कह सकते हैं कि जो नॉन अलाइंड मूवमेंट वाली माइंडसेट थी, जो माइंडसेट था, उससे हट करके हम बिल्कुल ही इंडिपेंडेंट उस तरह की पॉलिसी पर आ गए हैं जहां अमेरिका जहां डिफेंसिव है, जहां चाइना आगे बढ़ रहा है, वो जो भी करे, लेकिन हमारी पॉलिटिक्स बड़ी साफ है. और अब ऐसा नहीं होगा जो आपने अभी बताया कि पाकिस्तान के मसले में पिन प्रिक करते रहते थे, डैमेज करते रहते थे, लेकिन उन्हीं लोगों से हमारी दोस्तियां भी बहुत हैं. उनको समझ में आ गया वो शरारतें बंद कर देंगे क्या, क्योंकि कभी कनाडा से कुछ खबर आ जाती है, कभी यूके से कुछ खबर आ जाती है.
नहीं, देखिए, माने पॉलिटिक्स हर जगह बहुत कॉम्पिटिटिव होती है. इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स तो सुपर कॉम्पिटिटिव होती है. तो इसमें जो है, अगर आपकी कोई कमज़ोरी हो तो आपके दोस्त भी उसका उपयोग करते हैं. ये हकीकत तो ये है. तो हमें जो है एक किस्म से दोस्ती तो बनानी, दुनिया के साथ तो बनानी चाहिए, पर हमें हमारे मन में ये भी बहुत माने क्लियर होना चाहिए कि जब हमारे हितों का सवाल है, हमारी सुरक्षा का सवाल है, तो उसमें जो है हमें कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ नहीं करना चाहिए. अब मैं जानता हूँ कि कहना बहुत आसान है, करना थोड़ा और कठिन है, पर अगर आप देखें जहाँ जहाँ हमको स्टैंड लेना था, अब मैं पिछले कुछ सालों के उदाहरण देता हूँ आपको. आपने खुद यूक्रेन की बात उठाई. हमारे मन में बहुत स्पष्ट था कि अगर पेट्रोल एनर्जी के दाम बढ़ेंगे, हमें देखना चाहिए कि हमारे हित में क्या है. हम आर पर कैपिटा इनकम टुडे इज बिलो $3,000. I cannot unnecessarily, I should not expose our people to an inflation due to petrol hike if I can find a better solution. So, for me as foreign minister, I had very clear directions from Prime Minister that you will take whatever stand which is best for India, and if that meant making it clear that we will follow a certain energy policy, we did. Same thing I would say with Kashmir. That when 370 happened, I traveled around the world explaining to people what 370 was about. I said, first of all, please see, kaha wahan temporary. I mean, which part of the word temporary don't you understand? So once you explain to people that, this is our interest, this is our position, hum ye karenge. Dekhiye, today we are still we are a nation of 1.4 billion people, we are fifth largest economy. You take a stand, you say it confidently, people accept it. But if you don't take a stand and you are hesitant about pushing your own views, अब दुनिया चढ़ जाती है आपके सर.
बिल्कुल, एकदम आपका काफ़ी वक्त लिया. आखिरी सवाल एक पूछना चाहूँगा. आपने एक टर्म यूज़ किया रीग्लोबलाइजेशन, और आपने रीजनल ब्लॉक्स की बात कही, मल्टीपोलैरिटी की बात कही आपने. तो जिस ग्लोबलाइजेशन को हम जैसे जानते थे, मान लीजिए कि वो डेड है, और अब जिस तरह का रीजनल इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट हो रहा है, उसमें एक फ़िक्र, चूँकि हम सब लोग डिजिटल एज में हैं, तो ये है कि अब ये हमारा इंटरनेट भी जो है वो शायद स्प्लिंटरनेट हो जाए, डेमोक्रेटिक वर्ल्ड का एक इंटरनेट हो जाए, चाइना जैसे देश का एक हो जाए. इसके दोनों साइड से आर्गुमेंट हो सकता है. एक लार्जर पिक्चर विथ योर एक्सपीरियंस, एंड यू आर नेविगेटिंग most complicated things currently. What kind of world we are going to see? Multipolar, that means that broken world actually.
You see, that word broken is a very loaded word, because would you like to be united and under somebody else's control? Or would you like to be broken in inverted commas and have freedom of action? To me, it's not a broken world. It is, see, what is today one of the big problems? Because this is a problem that COVID brought out to us very clearly. that there is over concentration. You know, when COVID happened, forget about ventilators and PPEs, even masks and gloves. Everybody found you had to go to one country and put orders, and prices went up 5 times, 10 times, 15 times. Now, COVID taught us that tomorrow something else can happen. Some other pandemic can happen, conflict can happen, climate event can happen. In any, think of the world as a business. In any business, would you depend on one supplier? You know, there are rules in this country, in fact, in most democratic economies, saying, what are called antitrust. Kisi ki monopoly nahi honi chahiye. You know, one company should not run all the businesses. You have a antitrust at home, but you will allow in the world economy, a single source or a single geography to control most things. True. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's actually very dangerous. So what is the lesson from COVID? The lesson from COVID is, please diversify production, have more centers, have more supply chains, have more transparent supply chains. So when I say, and I give you, one part of it is this concentration. The other part, if you look during COVID, there were countries which stocked 8 times the population of that country in terms of vaccines. 8 times. And next to it were countries who did not get 1 vial of vaccine. How can you allow that in this day and age? So it is important today. You know, हम सब अफ्रीका की बात करते हैं. You want to help Africa, help them build health capacities. You know, why is it? Why is it took a country like India? I've been to, मैं अगल बगल की बात नहीं कर रहा, not a neighborhood of India. In the Caribbean, why should countries in Caribbean get their first vaccine from India? Why did they not get it from Europe and from North America? They are much closer. They had more vaccines. So look, today this old model of globalization benefited limited number of companies, limited number of countries. It created a global business which was controlled by few people. To me, it was fundamentally anti-democratic. It was anti-democratic. The global risks were very high. The COVID showed that. I think today, if you ask people in Africa or Latin America or Asia, people want to be more in control of their lives. The next time there is a crisis, I don't want to depend on some other country and say, Acha, will he give me or not give me? I want to have some basic capacities at hand. I can give you the opposite also. You know, today, one reason, if you go to the Gulf, every Gulf country remembers one thing about us. Is desh mein lockdown tha, but we did not stop food supplies to the Gulf. Every Gulf country remembers this. So I would say, I'm not in denial of globalization. Ye hakikat hai, you cannot reverse it. But unfair globalization, concentrated globalization, that is something which I think we should first put it into the talk shop, as you say. प्रचार करना चाहिए, get people लोगों को जागृत करना चाहिए.
Exactly. तो ये जो आपने कहा, ठीक है, आप विदेश मंत्री हैं और आपकी अपनी एक लैंग्वेज है या टर्मिनोलॉजी है. क्या मैं यूं कंक्लूड करूं इस चर्चा को कि जहां पर एक अमेरिका और यूरोप की लीडरशिप या दादागिरी कमज़ोर हो रही है, चाइना चलता रहेगा और उसकी भी दिक्कतें हैं, ऐसे में भारत अब लीडिंग पावर बनने के लिए जो बाकी देश हैं, डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्रीज़ जो हैं सारी, उनका एक बड़ा वॉइस बनने के लिए वेल पॉइज्ड है और इस अपॉर्चुनिटी को अब हम ग्रैब करके ही मानेंगे.
नहीं, एक तो मुझे खुशी हुई कि आपने ये शब्द लीडिंग पावर का प्रयोग किया, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है कि हमें भी एम्बिशियस होना चाहिए. नो, आफ्टर ऑल वी आर अ old civilization, we are 1/6 of humanity, as I said, 5th largest economy, likely to be 3rd. So there is a lot. There is nothing wrong in being ambitious. But ambitious should be backed by performance. And today people say, जो हमारी चर्चा जो है G20 से शुरू हुई, why did 125 countries agree to meet us very quickly and say, okay, please, this is what we want you to put? Because we have credibility today. We are not just the country in the middle. Yes, there is an east-west and there's a north-south. But this India, which is today bridging east-west and north-south, also commands respect due to what we have achieved over the last 10 years. It could be digital, it could be COVID, it could be, innovation, startup. So I think there is a lot that we have going for us. And my sense is that there is a lot that मुझे जो वहाँ अभी भी याद है जो राष्ट्रपति रामाफोसा ने कहा that this is not only India's achievement. All of us today are feeling that Chandrayaan up there is also ours. I think there are very few countries, other people's spaceships went up. I don't know if anybody else evoked the same sentiment that we did.
Right. Since you observed that word, I noticed that word, leading power. So conventionally, people have used the word superpower. Do you think great power in the context of India is a better word?
I would say, देखिए बहुत सोच समझ के we arrived at a certain formulation. So I think leading power, see, that era of superpower I think is over.
I'm more fascinated with great power.
Okay, we will continue this debate some other time.
थैंक यू सो मच सर. आप अभी बहुत बिजी हैं मुझे पता है, लेकिन देश में इस वक्त G20 का ये जो आयोजन हो रहा है उसमें हमारे कुछ मेहमान यहाँ, देशी मेहमान, विदेशी मेहमान. वादा आपका ये था कि पूरी बातचीत हिंदी में करेंगे, लेकिन थोड़ी सी अंग्रेज़ी, थोड़ी सी हिंदी में ये बातचीत हुई. सारा आइडिया ये था कि NDTV प्लेटफॉर्म, जिस पर कि विदेश नीति का कवरेज ऐसे भी बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, उसमें हम लोग इस कन्वर्सेशन को इंडियन ऑडियंसेस के लिए और हमारी ग्लोबल ऑडियंसेस के लिए ऐसा एक्सेसिबल बनाएं कि ये समझ में आए कि G20 इस वक्त सिर्फ एक और इवेंट नहीं है जो एनुअल इवेंट होता है दुनिया भर के देशों के कैलेंडर का. ये शायद एक ट्रांसफॉर्मेशनल मोमेंट है और 9-10 सितंबर को जाहिर है कि इसके आउटकम से हमको उसकी जानकारी मिलेगी. आपने वक्त निकाला, आपका बहुत शुक्रिया, एंड थैंक यू ऑल.
Thank you.